Okay, so if anyone remembers, about 2 months ago-ish, I did a poll where I asked people about what was their first Fire Emblem game, how old were they when they played it, what was the circumstances, and since then I expanded this into 2 other polls slash questionnaires, whatever you want to call them, and I got a lot of responses, a lot of varied responses. The what was your first Fire Emblem game was definitely more of a hive mind answer, but we'll get into that in a moment. So I'm going to go through 3 answers from each of these. As much as I would like to do more than that, it's not really feasible for a video, and I kind of want to keep this kind of short. So let's get into the first question I asked, which was, what was the first Fire Emblem game you played, and when did you play it? How old were you? What was the circumstances? And I got a lot of responses on this, but I'll go into Davis's response first because this kind of encompasses a lot of some of these responses, which was, my brother got FE7 for a vacation trip while I got Pokemon Leaf Green. We both watched each other's playthroughs and swapped games. During my first ever run, your boy loved Axe Bro Dorcas and Big Iron Will and Bosswin. Since that game, I've grown up buying every Western release of Fire Emblem on its launch. I vividly remember getting the last Rain Dawn copy at GameStop and feeling so hyped watching that intro cutscene for the first time. This encompasses a lot of answers, which is, my first game was FE7. That's something that you'll hear quite a lot when you kind of look through these responses. It's also why I'm not going to go into like that many people's my first game was FE7 response, because there was like a lot of these, like a ton of people are like FE7, 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 and I think that's a testament to how specifically Fire Emblem Blazing Blade and Fire Emblem Awakening were a lot of people's first games in the series. Obviously, they're 2 of the best-selling games in the entire franchise. Amusingly enough, FE7 actually, I think, flopped in Japan, but it was a huge success over here, which is why obviously we got so many of them in the West afterward. But it's very interesting that there's a lot of people have this like hive mind of, yes, FE7 was the first game, yes, FE13 was the first game. I don't hear that much with Three Houses, which is really odd, because Three Houses is the best-selling game in the series, which I think is a little concerning, because I feel like that means that a lot of the people who started with Three Houses didn't really stick with the series. I don't know, it something to kind of think about, I guess. Next we have one from Eric, which is, Smash Bros was my first intro into Fire Emblem. Marth and Roy were just so cool, but then Ike was in Brawl and he was Giga Chad. I remember downloading a GBA emulator in FE7 in the summer of high school. I was 15, I think, but man did I love it. Your first Fire Emblem game gives you a unique experience. Your funds aren't managed well, you overtrain some units, use the Jagging a bit too much. I used Marcus the whole game because I really like the Paladin animations. You wonder why you get doubled because you don't know what the heck a speed formula is. Edgy Sword Master is cool. Then I played FE8 and loved the story very much. Never thought the game series could be so dark. Then I remember playing the SNES Fire Emblems on a jailbroken iPad Touch and loved the hell out of those, even though they took me forever to complete because I was bad at the games. What made me fall in love with the series were the animations, sound effects, the music, the character design, and the story in the case of FE4 and 8. If I had to pick which one detail drew me in, I would definitely be character design. I remember seeing the artwork for FE7 and thinking Ellie Wood was really cool and elegant. This is kind of interesting because I feel like this is the other avenue people really get into Fire Emblem from, is Smash Bros. Obviously, Melee was a huge contributor for Binding Blade sales, and of course in the West it was the sales for FE7, because a lot of people kind of looked at Ellie Wood and thought he was Roy. And it's really interesting to kind of see that there's really 2 avenues into Fire Emblem. It's that you get in through Smash, you get in through FE7 or 13. There is no other way you get in. I mean, you can kind of see somebody else playing Fire Emblem, but I've known people who don't really get in off of that, so it's really interesting to see that those are like the 2 main avenues. And then Crisps McLean says, first FE game I played was FE9. My friend had a GameCube back then. That was one of the games we used to play. I didn't remember if we ever finished. More recently, around 5 or so years ago, I got back into playing the series thanks to Excelblum's FE11 video, which motivated me to play the rest of the series. This is kind of funny because I feel like FE9 is one of the most unexpected ways to get into Fire Emblem. The thing about FE9 is that FE9 didn't sell well at all, and it was I remember so hard to even get my hands on a copy of FE9 back in the day. Like, even when it was like kind of fresh on the shelves, I still had a hard time tracking it down. And it is really, really interesting to hear somebody say, oh yeah, I got into it with FE9, and I think that's awesome because FE9 is one of my favorite games. But yeah, no, that's cool. I like that. And Excelblum's FE11 video is really funny, just playing Fire Emblem in the most degenerate, I'm going to kill all my units way possible. Or as you could argue, that's how I play Fire Emblem, but, you know, I don't usually pull it back afterwards, I just kind of flounder and die. That was that, so let's get into the next questionnaire that I asked. So the next questionnaire I asked people was, what is your favorite era of the series? And with a resounding 56%, GBA and GameCube won. Obviously, a lot of people really like Fire Emblem 6, started with 7, 8 is extremely moddable, and of course FE9 is very beloved. The next, surprisingly next most common was NES and SNES with 16%. I kind of assume that a lot of what's carrying this one would probably be FE4. Maybe FE5 as well, as a lot of people who are super dedicated to FE5. But the one that got barely lower than that was 3DS and Switch, which isn't super surprising to me. There's as many people who like Fates as dislike Fates. A lot of people hate Engage. And Three Houses is also very divisive. Awakening is interesting because I think a lot of people like it now, but not enough to say they love it. And then the absolute lowest was DS and Wii with a measly 13%. I imagine the reason that DS and Wii got so low is because obviously the Arcanea games are probably the least played games in the series. I don't really hear people talk about FE11 and 12 that much, especially 12. And obviously Radiant Dawn is kind of a divisive game. A lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it. I personally love Radiant Dawn. I think Radiant Dawn's very fun, but there are many people who do not like Radiant Dawn, and I can kind of see the argument for it. The Dawn Brigade is probably the biggest factor. So let's get into some of the answers I got for this poll. We'll start with what Madness said. Madness said, I like the simplicity of the GBA and GameCube games. They managed to be great strategy games while still not being too complex like the 3DS era, or insanely unfair like the NES and Super NES era. So I both agree and disagree with this statement. I agree that the beauty of the GBA and GameCube, well, one GameCube game, is definitely the simplicity of them. FE 6 to 8 feel like pure raw core Fire Emblem, like very similarly to FE 11 and 12, while I feel like the beauty of FE 9 is that it kind of goes back to Kaga's vision of like, terrain is not super common, terrain is not always there. Skills are interesting, they definitely add a layer to it. Like, it feels like FE9 was a lot of what Kaga's vision would be for FE if he had stayed with the company. As for what he said about the 3DS Onward era, I agree. It definitely gets a little bit too complex to be fun. I feel like FE at its best is when Fire Emblem is simply going off of its core mechanics. Like, raw FE is best FE. There's a reason that I love FE11, FE12, FE9. I think they're fantastic games. Now, as for what he said with the unfairness of the NES and SNES era, I know this is obviously a jab at him losing the FE4 race because of what happened to Do, and while that is a very unfortunate case because he got a really bad RNG seed, it doesn't really translate to FE4 as a whole. I do agree FE5 is unfair. I think FE5 is deliberately unfair on Kaga's part. Like, the fact that the maximum hit in Thracia is 99 is very obnoxious because there's always that 1% chance you could miss, which happens more often than not when you're on 1RN. Like, people don't understand that, but 1RN is very scary when you've only got a 99% chance to hit, because there's always that chance that that 1% is going to go off in the back of your mind. As for my opinions on FE1 and 2, I can kind of agree that Gaiden can be a bit unfair at times. I don't think FE1's overly unfair, but Gaiden definitely is. Gaiden has weird moments where the game just becomes this weird mess. I think that's more so because Kaga envisioned Fire Emblem 2 more so as an RPG than as an SRPG. So obviously it runs more like an RPG would, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but is a thing. But yeah, I would agree with this. I like the GBA and the GameCube games. I'm also a big fan of the DS era. I think the DS era is great. Hyroli says, NES and SNES were meh. Never tried the 3DS ones because I'm poor and don't own a computer strong enough to run them or buy them legally. And for the Switch, I was once again too poor for the games. So I assume what Pyroli here is saying is that basically the GBA games are what they're sticking to because it's what they can play. I would agree that the NES and Fire Emblem 3 are kind of meh. I think that Fire Emblem 3 is a good looking game, and I definitely think it has the nice bones that a lot of what FE12 was built on, but other than the story, as I'm playing through FE3, I can't really see a reason to play it over FE12. like in terms of overall. I do like FE3 because obviously the story of FE3 is very good. But the problem with FE3 is just that there's no real reason to play it when New Mystery exists and plays significantly better. And lastly for this one we have Skitty on Whalelord, who says, started playing FE12 after watching your draft race with Eric and Tactical Duelist, can safely say it has ascended to being my favorite game in the series, so I'll give the DS Wii era my vote. Playing Reverse Lunatic for the first time and I'm having a blast with it. Yeah, I think that there is definitely a certain joy to Reverse Lunatic in FE12. It is a significantly different kind of Fire Emblem experience. But the interesting part about New Mystery, I find, is that if you play it on Reverse Lunatic, it becomes a completely different game. If you play it on Lunatic or lower, it is still Fire Emblem. It's like you are effectively getting two different strategy games in one, and I enjoy that a lot. Glad to hear that the race was able to get somebody into New Mystery. It's my favorite game in the series, tied with 4. And yeah, I'm glad to hear it. Makes me happy. So let's move on to the final poll slash questionnaire slash mess of a post that I put up, and let's read into that, shall we? And for the final poll, I asked people what is their favorite character from a mainline game and a ROM hack, and I got plenty of responses for this, so I'm going to go over 3 of them like I did for the last 2 posts. I would do 5, but unfortunately the problem is I don't want this video to be too long. I'm working on a lot of other stuff, and this was just more so intended to be kind of a fun little thought experiment thing. I will state for the record that I might do more of these if people like this video, and I've got a few other questions lined up to kind of go over, so let's get into this. Get Lost Gaming says, well, this isn't a fair poll at all because I have a lot of favorites from some of the same games, but I'll answer with one for each. Mainline, Dimitri, Three Houses. I'm a huge fan of characters that have different storylines and actions that they can do based on what happens to them, and he shows some of the best growth as a character as well as feeling extremely well integrated into the story. I agree with this completely. I have a lot of gripes with Three Houses, but I think the way Dimitri is written is perfect. I think that between his kind of trauma from the Dusker Massacre and a lot of other things that happen to him throughout the plot, he reacts very reasonably to a lot of insane BS, and I like him as a character overall. He's like one of the parts of Three Houses that I will never deny is extremely well done. Get Lost goes on to say, for ROM hacks, it's gotta be Onderon, right? I have 2 answers. My original is Isabel for a ton of reasons, and gameplay-wise, but I saw a comment about her, so I'll give it to Christina. She is 0 to hero unit, and I usually don't like those until chat forced me to use all of them, and I kind of became the Christina guy. It was fun making her stronger and getting her to get the Rose Thorn from Sam, absolutely one of the most memorable units I've ever had. So, of the trainees in Onderon, I will definitely state I am a big Christina fan. I think Christina is the best of them. I don't like Elmer at all. I really, really strongly hate Ralphnir because he just joins so late that he has no value in the game. And Natalie is one that I'm very hit or miss on because on one hand, I like her as a unit, and I like her writing-wise, but there's something about her that always felt off to me. But Christina is by far my favorite. I like Rosethorn, it is my favorite regalia. I'm also a pretty big fan of Cav movement. I don't know if anyone's noticed this by now. So Christina just always works for me. So next up we have Tom Schuyler, who responded with an absolute novel of a post, but I will gladly read through all of it because I think it was incredibly insightful and I think he has a lot of really good points here. He says, tough questions for me as I have difficulty picking favorites. I'll do it by games I played to give you extra material. Genealogy of the Holy War, Larse. If set up right, Larse can cut through enemies better than her mother could. Her proccing Astra is a delight to see. With Holland's Luna ability, she can deal extra damage. She's so fun to use. So fun fact, Holland is actually probably the worst father for Larse because you cannot proc Astra and Luna at the same time because sword skills don't stack. However, I do agree about Larse. I think that Larse, to be a memorable unit in a game where you are undoubtedly going to lag behind everyone else, right? Like, the fact that Larse is so beloved by the community and doesn't have a horse and horse emblem is a big deal. It is. It's really, really nice because it really does mean that she is a memorable character. She's a very well-liked character. If you marry Ira to Jamka, you can actually give her the machine gun build, as it's always been called, which is to give her, like, Astra, Accost, Pursuit, and I think it's Adept, and I think in total she can hit up to 32 times, which is absolutely ridiculous and would never happen. Like, even if you could pull it off, I don't think there's like an enemy in the game that would actually survive that. It's just really funny. I love Larce. The Binding Blade, Clarine, she's a troubadour with great dodging ability. With the right supports, she can potentially lure enemies to attack her while she dodges them all. Once they're where you want them, you go in with your troops and annihilate them, plus having a healer is always a plus in my army. That is a fantastic point. In my hard mode playthrough that I've been doing in my own time, I have noticed that Clarine just has a tendency to not get hit, which is really nice for a healer. Like, having a healer who's never really in danger is always a nice thing to have. Blazing Blade, tough call, but I guess Sarah. I like her personality and I like her healing capabilities. And her choice is Farina for her personality and abilities. I tend to get lucky with Pegasus Knights, and when I first used Farina, she wasn't as good as Florina or Fiora, but she was still quite good once I got her sports established and she got a few levels. In addition, she completed the triangle attack, and I love using triangle attacks. Yes, I am a big fan of the triangle attack. I think the triangle attack is one of the mechanics that makes Fire Emblem. I'm not huge on FE7's roster. I have said on record before that I think it is the most forgettable roster in the entire franchise, and that includes FE, 11 and 12's gigantic Giga rosters with like a million units that are super forgettable, like frickin' Maphis, for example. But I think that FE7 does have a few enjoyable units here and there. I'm not huge on Sarah personally. I don't like her. I think she's a bit bratty for my liking. I mean, Clarine's bratty too, but I think Clarine's more acceptable because she's supposed to be like 13, 14. Like, I expect a character like that to be bratty. Like, Sarah's supposed to be like 16, 17, 18. She's supposed to be older, so it's a little weird. Yeah, I kind of agree with this. I think that just off the triangle attack alone, like, triangle attacks can make characters very memorable. It's why the Armor Knights in FE6 are so memorable, because they're like the only ones in the series that aren't flyers that have a triangle attack. Sacred Stones, either Ross or Nemi. I like training units due to the satisfaction I get from training them. Ross is the easiest training unit to train up, so I have more success with him. Once he gets going, he gets going. Their choice is Nami, since I like her backstory. She's a crybaby, so it's very satisfying to see her raised into a powerful sniper, especially if ace sport with Culm. I like both these units a lot. Ross is probably my favorite trainee in the entire franchise. I can't think of another trainee I like more than Ross. Well, I guess, does Raxus count as a trainee? Now that I think about it, I mean, I guess she's like the only princess class in the entire game, if I'm remembering right, and she does need to be trained and babied a lot, so I guess Raxus counts. So if that's the case, Raxus is definitely my favorite trainee, but Ross would definitely be a close second in that case. As for Nami, I actually like Nami a lot. I think Nami is probably... I was going to say she's my favorite archer in the series, but obviously Warren is my favorite archer. She's great. I like the fact that she and Culm have an instant C support. That really helps kind of like make them both memorable and builds character for both of them a lot. She also does have a nice backstory, which Tom brings up, like the talk she has about like growing up and like learning how to be an archer and her grandfather and stuff is really nice. And it's not like Chris from New Mystery, where all the talks about her grandfather are like grandfather training. Like, she actually has memories, and it feels real and fleshed out. Yeah, I like Nami. Radiant Dawn, Nephne and Braum. They work well together and they're fun to use. It's been a long time since I played Radiant Dawn, but I remember them pretty well. I deployed them as much as I could, and they served me well. I feel like Nephne and Mia got, like, super mega ultra buffed in FE10 to make up for the fact they weren't very good in FE9. Like, I know a lot of people like training Nephne and FE9, and I'm also guilty of this, but she's not a very good unit, especially not in a game like FE9, which is filled to the brim with like calves and flyers that just completely outclass her. Even Mia has an argument for her in Maniac mode because of the fact that she has Vantage in an enemy-focused game. That is a surprisingly big advantage in the long term, but I feel like Nephne in FE10 just became this monster because they were like, oh, we need to buff her because she was bad in FE9. They did the same thing to Mia, and both of them just became disgustingly good good. Braum is great in both FE9 and 10. Like, Braum is fantastic in both games. Shadow Dragon Sheeta, I tend to get lucky with Pegasus Knights, and Sheeta can get mighty for me. I send her off and she gets the job done. Yeah, Sheeta in FE11, I feel like kind of gives off the single best unit impression in the entire series, because one, she has a PRF that just absolutely destroys everything, and two, she's required to recruit like half the game's roster. And because of the fact that also she and Marth are like two of the only characters in FE11 who really have any sort of character development, really helps her be memorable. I really do like Sheeta in FE11. She's great in FE12 as well, but she's not the same as FE11. FE11 Sheeta is another monster entirely. Awakening Morgan, I can't help it. She's my avatar's baby girl, and she was very powerful at that. The idea of her being my avatar's daughter was very appealing for me when I played for the first and second time, so I'll always have a soft spot for her. I also like having Tiki as her mother because I like the idea of both continuing the bloodline of Grima's mortal enemy and having a dragon as a child. So, I actually think that Morgan, along with Robin, are two of the most absurd units in the history of Fire Emblem. They're both ridiculous. I put them like right up there with like Chris from FE12, Paula from FE12, Har from FE10, Sigurd from FE4. Although Sigurd I don't think is as powerful as people give him credit for, because he can get very speed screwed, as we saw in my draft race. But there are some units in Fire Emblem who are just notorious for being ultra powerful, and I really do like that. I think that it does help make units super memorable. It hurts gameplay balance a lot, don't get me wrong, but it does make them super memorable that you can just look at FE10 and go, oh yeah, Har, he destroys this game, to somebody who's new. Like, I remember I told somebody about that recently, and they were like, oh, Har's that good? I'm like, yes, Har is that good. And that's always a very satisfying feeling. And Morgan and Robin definitely fall under that. Fates, Scarlet, I think her personality is rather sweet, and she's very caring for Corrin. I like her quirk about bedazzling everything. Also, I like my flyers, and Scarlet can be quite good at that. I also don't like how she gets shafted in Revelations. That makes me more partial to her. Everybody gets shafted in Revelations. Revelations was made in like 10 minutes. Revelations was like, hey, we have all these assets laying around. What if we make a third game because this one was so successful in like 15 minutes and see if we can pump out something playable? It wasn't. I'm not going to comment too much on this one because I don't really have any opinions on any of the Fates characters aside from like Xander and Perry. And Xander solely because of the fact that he shares my name. Yeah, I'm not huge on Fates, and I don't really have much to say about it, so we're gonna move on to Echoes. Echoes Est. When I say Est is best, I'm not entirely kidding. I like training up units, and Est can be powerful. I make sure she supports her sisters, and I like how powerful she can get. Plus, I'm always a fan of the triangle attack, and the triangle attack looks epic in that game, even if it doesn't always hit. Yeah, so Echoes, very good at presentation. Like, fantastic at presentation. Like, you can criticize the game for anything else, but presentation is fantastic. As for Est as a unit, she is probably at her best in Echoes. I'm trying to think if there's another game in the series. Maybe FE1, actually. She might be a bit better there, but Est is not terrible. Like, in any game other than, like, FE3 and 12, Est is perfectly fine. Those games she gets absolutely shafted. But Est is a fun trainee unit. I do actually like her quite a bit. It is, I mean, she spawned a whole archetype. You know, I mean, every game basically has an Est. You know, late game joining unit with insane growths. Sometimes with a higher XP gain. Very cool. I like Est a lot. Three Houses Bernadetta. I feel for Bernadetta's agoraphobia and her tragic backstory. I can't help but want to train her up to try and make her more confident. Seeing her dominate on the battlefield is my reward. I was also very touched when she left her room to put flowers on spoilers' grave, since that was a big step for her. Seeing her out of her room for the entirety of Crimson Flower is one highly subjective reason I prefer that route, since that is huge for her. It also makes me feel that training her up worked out. Irrational, I know. She's also the first character I had Byleth marry. Bernadetta is a victim of 3H's writing, because on one hand, the devs clearly know that a lot of what they're talking about with Bernadetta is a very serious and very dark issue. On the other hand, they turn into a joke as often as possible. As for her unit feel, I find it interesting because I'm pretty sure she's in like A tier, isn't she? Like, she's really high ranked. as far as tier lists go. I mean, I'm not like huge on Three Houses meta, but I'm pretty sure like Bernadette's like high up there with the likes of Shamir and a few others. I like Bernadetta too. She is one of the more memorable characters for me in 3H because I find a lot of 3H's cast kind of forgettable. Onderon Saga, Runa. With enough training and the right sports, Runa can be a mage extraordinaire as well as a bow user. It is so fun to use her. I like her stories well. I feel like this one's a personal attack against me because I always kill her by accident in all of my runs. Runa is... I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without making everyone angry at me. Runa, I find, is not a worthwhile unit because a lot of the other magic units in the game will do what she does better. And even in terms of her regalia, it's like more worth it, I find, to just use Varg. I don't know. I don't like Runa gameplay wise. I like her as a character. I actually do like Runa. Contrary to popular belief, I don't kill her on purpose. It's just that the way you recruit her just tends to get her killed with the way GBA AI works. Rebellion Saga, Madeline, my Pegasus Knight. Luck does incredibly well for her. I make sure she got training and the right sports, and she rewarded me well for her. I gave her the Barrier Sword for Chapter 8. She trivialized that chapter. I struggled with 7. I breezed through 8. It was a nice change of pace for me. She soloed entire parts of the battlefield for me. It was tremendous fun. Yeah, so Madeline is, I think, unironically, aside from Garant, probably the best unit in Rebellion Saga. I think... I can't really think of another unit that compares to her. What makes Madeline so ridiculous is, 1, she gets a PRF that trivializes an entire chapter. 2, she's available... like basically from the start. I mean, you're talking about like what, turn 1 or 2 of chapter 2. She's like one of the few flyers you get in Rebellion, one of the few early game flyers you get, and on top of that, like, she's just so good. She is so good. What a ridiculous unit. I love her. I think she's great. It's very satisfying to use her as well, especially after like Onderon Saga just gave you a big middle finger when you tried to recruit her. That's my rather long list. Hope that helps, Xander. It does indeed, Tom. So, with that, I think we can get to the final one for this video. I had a lot of options for this. I'll shout out Kokiro Lendario's post about Arden. I'll shout out Berserker's post. There was a lot of these that I really liked and a lot of really good answers, but this one was the one that I had to go with because this one was just too funny not to. So Neo Kakarot, our good buddy Neo here, says, I know Sophia is a terrible unit, but in my FE6 playthrough she actually saved my run. I played through FE6 completely on a whim. It had been so many years at the time since I played an older FE game, and my spoiled ass was so completely used to the modern quality of life of the series. I was also a lot newer to streaming than I am now, and was even more susceptible to being distracted. That run of FE6 was unreal in the amount of deaths I had, and my stubborn ass only ever Tin Man's FE games, so it was rough. Sophia, after a lot of luck and grinding, became my strongest unit in the game, and I didn't have to do a restart. I've been a Sophia simp ever since. Poor bastard, he can't escape this girl. I don't know how to respond to this post. Because the rational part of me goes, Sophia's the worst unit in the series aside from, like, FE12 Bantu. Like, it doesn't get much worse than her. On the other hand, I can kinda almost picture how this happened, but it's really, really funny to me that someone's run was saved by a Sophia, a unit that is so notoriously bad that if you put her at the very start of the game in Chapter 1, she would get one-rounded. That's very, very funny. The fact that Neo was able to save his run with the worst, definitive worst unit in FE6 is not only fantastic, but also just makes for great content. But I love these kinds of stories, though. I love these zero to hero stories of this unit is garbage and yet somehow saved my run. I mean, I've had a similar experience with some bad units in the past. I mean, I've had a experience that with Midia in FE11, where she just kind of had to pick up the slack because I lost a lot of units and I had banned substitute units. So it's really, really interesting to hear stories like this. And I want to clarify this before this video ends, that even if I didn't get around to reading your comments, don't worry about it. If this video does well, if a lot of people like it, if a lot of people watch it, I will definitely do another one of these at some point, probably in the new year. And I enjoyed this. I enjoyed kind of peeking into the psyche of the FE community and kind of seeing like what people are into, what people like to see when they play Fire Emblem, what kind of games they start off with, and how it shaped them as a player. I'm a big fan of this. I had a lot of fun with this, and I'm gonna call it a video. And like I said, if this does well, if people enjoy it, I will definitely do another series of posts probably in December, and then another video like this in January. But I'm gonna call it, and next time.